This mysterious story, which occurred in early 2021, instantly spread across the globe. A single man walked into his apartment and vanished. No one else entered his home. The man couldn't be found for over a month. But what happened next shocked the entire world. In this video, we'll tell you how a person can disappear in their own home and surprise everyone after a long time. Enjoy the video. This is the story of 50-year-old Christopher Woitel from San Francisco. The man was a programmer but had been unemployed for the last few years. Due to the loss of a stable income, he fell into a depression and began to act frankly strange. Woitel's relatives said that in recent months he lived in constant fear. The man was afraid that political protests organized by Donald Trump's supporters at the time might break out near his home, and he could be harmed. He even considered moving to the mountains to live for a few months. Woitel also wrote strange posts on Facebook and asked his relatives for money for a new phone, as he had lost his old one. On January 9th at 3 p.m., he sent his niece a strange message. "Please tell Laura to check her messages. It's urgent." After that, Laura, Christopher's sister, tried to call him. But the man didn't answer. Over the past few months, she had grown accustomed to her brother's strange behavior, but this message worried her greatly. What added to her anxiety was that on January 8th, her brother had sent her several disturbing messages. In one, he claimed to have heard explosions outside his apartment. In another, he wrote that a car drove past his house with a loudspeaker calling for Trump supporters to take to the streets. His sister and other relatives waited for several days, hoping Christopher would get in touch. None of them could go to his home, as the family lived in other cities. But he still didn't answer his calls. And on January 11th, the family decided to contact the police. However, the local police were reluctant to search for Christopher. According to them, there was no indication that the man was in any danger. Desperate for help, the family decided to hire a private investigator, Scott Williams. They also traveled to San Francisco to participate in the search. The first thing the detective did was go to Christopher's apartment. The door was locked from the inside. There were no signs of a struggle or any missing items. Everything looked as if the man had simply left home. But why was the door locked from the inside? Next, the detective reviewed the surveillance camera footage from Christopher's building, and this is where things got even stranger. The footage shows the man entering his apartment on the evening of January 8th and never leaving. Williams then assumed that Christopher might have used a secondary exit. The detective checked the camera footage covering that area and saw no signs of the man leaving the building. This confused everyone even more. Christopher came home, never left, but he wasn't in his apartment. How is that possible? By then, under pressure from the family, the police had finally taken on the case and were conducting their own investigation. They examined the apartment and couldn't figure out what had happened to Christopher. All of this drew widespread public attention to the mysterious story of Woitel's disappearance. The police and the private investigator began to piece together Christopher's last days. After speaking with relatives, they learned that Woitel was a very generous person and always helped those in need. He often let homeless people spend the night in his apartment. One of these homeless men was a man nicknamed Bud. He and Christopher had met several years ago and had kept in touch since. Sometimes Christopher would let him stay the night and would also periodically help him with money. He even gave him a smartphone and paid for his mobile service. On the evening of January 7th, less than 2 days before Woitel's disappearance, Bud came to his home, as evidenced by camera footage. The next day at 5:45 a.m., Bud left the building and did not return. According to records, on the night before his disappearance, Christopher wrote Bud an angry message on Facebook. Police determined that Bud had somehow gained access to Christopher's social media account and was sending messages to his contacts, the content of which has not been disclosed. This infuriated Woitel, and he wrote to Bud that he would no longer help him, demanding he never come to his home again. Private investigator Williams found and questioned Bud. First, he confirmed that Bud had Woitel's smartphone. The homeless man claimed he bought it from Christopher for $100. but the missing man's family doubted this statement. They believed Bud had simply stolen the phone during his visit to Woitel on January 7th. When the detective asked Bud what had actually happened to Christopher, the story became even more interesting. Bud claimed to have strong psychic abilities and had received a vision. According to the homeless man, Christopher was the victim of robbers who wanted to steal his computer equipment. They had supposedly removed his body from the house and dumped it in the ocean. Naturally, the detective dismissed Bud's words as complete nonsense. It's still unclear whether the homeless man has mental health issues or if he made all this up as a cover, but the detective stated that Bud was unlikely to be involved in Woitel's disappearance. The reason was that Bud had long suffered from a serious leg injury and could barely walk. This meant he couldn't have physically moved Woitel's body, even if he wanted to. Remember this detail about the injured leg.
Williams was at a dead end again. Not only did all evidence suggest Woitel never left the apartment, but the detective had no suspects who could be involved in the case. He also doubted the theory that Christopher had run away. There had been no activity on his bank account since his disappearance. Moreover, Woitel was in contact with his family almost daily and was unlikely to stop doing so voluntarily. Cogan Nelson, Christopher's neighbor, believed in the runaway theory. He knew the man well, as Woitel had once literally saved his life. One day, Nelson's kidneys began to fail. The attack was so severe that he couldn't reach his phone to call for an ambulance. Woitel heard his screams, called for medics, and helped get him into the car. He even rode with him to the hospital and stayed in his room to support his neighbor. Nelson shared an interesting observation with the private investigator. He often noticed two strange men visiting Christopher's apartment. Based on their appearance, the neighbors suspected they were connected to the criminal world. Nelson couldn't imagine Woitel being friends with such people. According to his theory, these men might have been threatening Christopher for some reason, and he decided to lie low. Unfortunately, he was wrong. On February 16th, information emerged that the police had found the body of Christopher Woitel, and on the 18th, law enforcement officially confirmed it. And now, for the part that makes this story incredibly strange. His body was found in his own apartment building. How is this possible? To recap, Christopher disappeared on January 9th, and his body was found on February 16th. Before the day of the discovery, the police and the private investigator had repeatedly searched the apartment and failed to find Woitel. So where was he all this time? According to the police statement, they found the man's body in the crawl space above his bathroom. The building is designed so that there is a void space, about 3 feet high above the top floor apartments, used for technical purposes and utilities, between the roof and the apartments. Apparently, neither the police nor the detective thought to look there. The strangeness doesn't end there. In their statement, the police mentioned they had to call the fire department to the scene. They couldn't retrieve the man's body themselves, and a hole had to be cut in the ceiling. This puzzled the investigation even more. How did Woitel get in there? Obviously, he couldn't have done it from inside his apartment. The only police theory was that the man had entered the space through the roof. Naturally, the main question on everyone's mind was, what happened to him? Was he murdered and his body hidden? According to the police, they found no injuries or signs that Christopher was a victim of an assault. This means his death was either self-inflicted or due to natural causes. Reddit users dissected this mysterious situation. According to the most popular theory on the forum, Christopher died of a heart attack. His mental health had been noticeably deteriorating in recent years. This was especially evident from his last social media posts and conversations with relatives. Woitel lived in a constant state of baseless fear. He saw danger everywhere. Such intense and prolonged stress at his age could have negatively affected his heart, and he didn't survive another panic attack. But how does all this explain the fact that Woitel ended up in the technical space above his bathroom? It's possible that before his disappearance, his panic reached a peak. Christopher might have felt he was in immediate danger, right here and now. He could have left his apartment, gone to the roof, and then climbed into the space above his bathroom. If we follow this theory, that's where the heart attack struck him. If we consider the version that someone might have attacked Woitel, we face one problem. No one entered his apartment after he did, which is confirmed by camera footage. The most obvious suspect in that case would be Bud. And as we remember, the man could barely walk due to his leg problem. He most likely would not have been physically able to move Woitel's body and hide it. To this day, the police and Christopher's family have not disclosed the cause of his death, even though pathologists should have determined it in the first days after the body was found. This further inclines us to believe that the death could have been from natural causes, and the family chose not to make this information public. In any case, the mysterious story of Christopher Woitel has captured the attention of people worldwide, and his memory will now be kept alive by thousands of compassionate people around the globe.
Subscribe to the channel to listen to these real and scary stories. Sometimes these stories end well, but more often badly. It's disturbing.